Hello, my ghouls and gamers. I'd like to welcome you to this new spine-chilling episode of Dollar Theater, the series where I talk about movies I find slithering around my local dollar store. Normally I would complain about the sheer volume of bad horror films haunting the halls of the store, but then I looked at the calendar and decided why not try to cash in on it. But beyond the time of year, today's gonna be special anyway, because I'm not just covering one film, nor two, I'm gonna be covering 3 terrifying tales. These films will haunt your nightmares and curse your very souls. We're gonna be hitting the full spectrum of horror, from the goofy and spooky to the downright chilling. So hold on to your seats and enjoy the show. The first movie I'm covering is a creature feature chock full of twists and turns. I'm talking about the bloody, the wild, and even kinda sucky Savage Creatures. Savage Creatures is a 2020 action horror film directed by Richard Lowry, a director out of the great state of Illinois, which is famous for, let me see. Oh, that's cool, I guess. He's directed his fair share of films throughout the years, none of which I've seen nor even sound vaguely familiar. But I do like the look of this one. Resident Evil. Something about a terrible play on Resident Evil just warms my cold, dead heart. While a couple of his films do look interesting.
Hypocrisy, insolence, lies, prejudice, and vanity.
The cover of Savage Creatures doesn't give me the best first impression, but you're never supposed to judge a book by its cover, so let's
just jump into it.
At the start of the film, we follow a pair of cannibals, Liz and Darby, a mother-son duo. Aw, how sweet. A family activity. These two like to pick up hitchhikers, drug them, then carve them up like Thanksgiving dinner. The only thing is, their Catholic guilt kicks in and they pray for forgiveness afterwards.
Amen.
So all is forgiven, I guess? Almost like in real life. Just ask actual war criminal and cannibal himself, General Butt Naked.
Kill their brothers, kill their sisters, rape them, cripple them. Christianity that can help this nation. Because Christianity, it is the only belief, the only faith that tells you to love your enemy.
While on the prowl one lovely afternoon, the family finds a pair of hitchhiking women on the street. So these good Samaritan pull over, pick up these 2 young ladies, who is oddly surprisingly willing just to hop into this stranger's van, while Liz and Darby play good Samaritans and bring them to their house. They offer them a nice meal, a bath, and a place to stay for the night. And here's where we get introduced to these 2 young ladies. The blonde one being Rose, and the brunette being Ursula. And now we see why they were so willing to hop into the van. Because once they're left alone in the bathroom, they try to rob the place. All they could scrounge up was a tiny bit of cash, which kinda made this whole endeavor not that worth it. But while the girls were trying to fill their pockets, Liz was downstairs preparing a little surprise for them. And once they come downstairs squeaky clean, their cannibal hosts jump them. And we can all guess what's coming next, right? Big Boy over here is gonna carve them up and throw them in the meat locker downstairs. Darby cuts off Ursula's arm. But there's one little thing that's a little different than usual. As soon as Darby turns around, Ursula's arm seems to grow right back. While you think it might be a boon for a cannibal like him, he seems a bit more perturbed by it. And before Darby can get any kind of conclusion from this matter, he gets jumped by Blondie, and Ursula joins in as well. Turns out the girls are vampires.
Oh my God!
Wow, with a wild twist like that, you might think we're getting towards the end of the film. Nope, this is only like 20 minutes in. And our vampire friends kill Liz. Then drive stakes into the hearts of their lovely hosts. I'm assuming it's to stop them from turning. The girls celebrate their night by having a nice meal, and even have a nice warm bath, where they spend most of it complaining about technology and how unhealthy people are nowadays. It's almost like listening to an episode of the Joe Rogan podcast.
Fucking crazy.
Somehow this conversation revs up the girls' engines, if you, catch my drift. You know what, it's about time we get ourselves a lesbian vampire film. Now the girls are spending a nice lovely morning together making coffee, watching the morning news, until... Breaking news! Meteors filled with weird aliens fall from the heavens. And these aliens are going around turning people into zombies? I wasn't exactly expecting zombies, but what the hell. The girls decide to make a mad dash out of the house. In broad daylight too. I guess we're playing with Twilight vampire rules here. They immediately get swarmed and they decide to barricade themselves in the house. Until later that day, a shotgun-wielding priest and a nun dual-wielding pistols barges into the house. Meet Father Cooper and Sister Gigi. They're from the local church and they're just checking on members of the congregation apparently. Remember, the cannibals were very faithful Catholics. This leading to some hilarious hijinks. When Father O'Houlihan over here starts throwing around holy water and swinging his cross around, leaving our vampire friends a little on edge. Eventually, the father finds the corpses still in the house, and he jumps to one odd conclusion here.
You're feminists.
This really breaking up the dream team we had. Apparently Father Seamus over here really can't work with feminists, at least until zombies break into the house. They were really quick to team up again when they needed help, but these good times couldn't last. Father Dale Cooper over here is the subject of the best kill in the film, where these zombies rip out his pineal gland, which for some odd reason that was explained, but it doesn't matter, is the aliens' real goal of making all these zombies. Then poor Sister Gigi also gets bit, and our main characters over here have no problem putting her down. Then the lasses just steal the cannibal's car. Remember when this film was about a cannibal family? I barely do. Then the two flee into the woods and decide to stay at the spookiest cabin they could find. I guess we're going for a cliche bingo here. The vampires find a dead alien in the cabin. It has been... well, I guess it's more of like a brain-heart combo according to the girl's explanation, but I think it looks more like a little pig. Also, I guess the alien's weakness is just getting shot, but before the girls can really put their newfound knowledge into action, they get ambushed by a couple of aliens. But after a long night, the aliens just kind of let them be. Rose says it's something about the aliens feeding on souls, and the fact that vampires don't have any meant they just got out safe. Then they just spend the rest of the afternoon shooting at the aliens in the sky. And then they just walk off into the sunset. A truly happy ending. Move over, Scorsese. This is what I call cinema. I honestly really can't help but love this movie. It's definitely bad. All the sound effects sound like they came out of a free library. The acting wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen, but it was also far from good.
Yeah.
But it was really fun. Some of the practical effects are solid, like this severed leg looks pretty good. The aliens also look really impressive as well. But some of those blood splatters... now that's what I call special effects. And the constant kind of dumb twist going on is really fun. It took me on a roller coaster ride that I won't soon forget. The movie actually moved along quite quickly too. If you want a deep, thoughtful horror film, you definitely won't find it here. But if you want something that feels like Sharknado with a quarter of the budget, you're in the right place. I'm gonna give this film 7 face huggers out of 10. This is the perfect movie to have some friends over, maybe have some drinks, and other chemicals, and just have a blast watching. It's a nearly perfect pick for spooky season. Welcome back, my ghoulies. That was truly something special, wasn't it? You don't find too many zombie, vampire, alien films in this neck of the woods. I really can't say that about our next film. Our next showing here at the Dollar Theater is a 2018 nun-based horror film, and not the one you're thinking either. We're not touching the Conjuring cinematic universe in this video. Today I'm talking about the eerie, the religious, the pregnant? Saint Agatha. Saint Agatha is a 2018 horror film directed by Darren Lynn Bousman. He's a very prolific horror director, his most famous films being essentially half of the Saw franchise. He directed Saws 2 through 4, as well as Spiral, and the new Saw 10. He also has some horror musicals under his belt, namely The Devil's Carnival and Repo the Genetic Opera. And this is the first time I've been somewhat familiar with a director's work before even watching a film for this video. I've seen Saws 2 and 3, fun films, but I wouldn't call them particularly scary, and I've also seen The Devil's Carnival for, reasons.
Minasan, Ohio! Miss Hannah Jinx here, talking about The Devil's Carnival!
And I honestly don't remember the movie very well. I saw it like a decade ago, but I think it was kind of just okay. His filmography has had some flops, like The Majesty that was Spiral.
Me no want no partner!
But like with all the films I watch here, I want to give it its fair shake. So let's see where St. Agatha sits next to the rest of Boseman's filmography. St. Agatha follows a young woman by the name of Mary in the 1950s, which that in itself is a setback. But what makes it worse is she got pregnant out of wedlock. And with nowhere else to turn, she goes to the most welcoming convent of nuns I've ever seen. These nuns do seem friendlier than most that I've known. We immediately get the feeling that something sketchy might be going on around here. Whether it's the vow of silence all the girls are forced to take, the random women crying behind closed doors, or this one lady that just keeps showing up with her mouth sewn shut. You know, just the normal red flags you get when you move into a new place. At least the rent is cheap here. We also get told that this convent isn't really associated with the church. It's instead funded by private investors. Like, what could go wrong with a bunch of shady investors funding a place full of pregnant women with nowhere to go? And while Mary's settling in, we get our first flashback of her past. And these flashbacks are dotted throughout the film, but I'm just gonna cover them all right up front, because honestly after like the second one you can just fill in the blanks, and you can kinda guess why she ended up in a creepy convent like this in the first place. We learn about Mary's abusive father, we meet her baby daddy, as well as her stupid little brother who died trying to grab a toy over the tub. The kid ends up hitting his head, and that little chungus bleeds out right in the tub. Mary tries to run away with her boyfriend, but they're both broke, so she ends up in a soup kitchen where she gets recruited for the convent. This info just kinda gets drip fed to you throughout the film. But after like the second one, I kind of figured out what was gonna happen. I could just be that big-brained, or maybe having all these flashbacks and splitting them up like they did wasn't that necessary. While Mary is in the convent, she has a really hard time adhering to that vow of silence. But so are all the other women there, and she ends up making fast friends with the other girls. Also, sometimes in the middle of the night, Slender Man's religious brother shows up. One night he kidnaps Mary and locks her in a coffin. You know, normal Catholic things. The staff and the mother of the convent has been drugging the girls, as well as gaslight, gatekeeping, girl bossing them, the whole time they're there. Extra emphasis on the gaslighting.
They've been gaslighting us.
Like lying to them about being crazy, or drugged, or that their child might have died. And while Mary's spending a night in the coffin, the lovely ladies of this convent, they force Mary to change her name, telling her she's not worthy to have Jesus' mother's name, and she stays in there until she willingly goes by the name of Agatha. It seems like almost a week passes until Mary Agatha decides to just give in, and once she willingly takes the name, she just gets released back into general pop. Then after just generally milling about for a while, the convent puts on their special donors brunch. And this whole scene makes it feel like these girls are really up for sale for these rich donors. The girls spend the day chatting up the donors, and the donors are looking them up and down like they're picking out a nice slab of meat. But Magatha wants no part of it. She uses this opportunity to bolt out of the convent. But sadly, she doesn't make it far, getting her legs stuck in a bear trap while she's still on the grounds. The nuns easily grab her and bring her back to the convent. Aw, how sweet, they're patching her up. See, they really do care. And then not long after, one of the central girls, Sarah, receives a punishment for running her mouth a little too much.
Oh, you didn't finish. You monster! You're a monster!
She gets a punishment that matches the crime, I guess? I personally think this disciplinary action is a little extreme, and this is in line with how nuns usually treat people though. Also somewhere along the line, Magatha's boyfriend shows up on the convent's doorsteps. I mean, which isn't surprising, he's kinda curious where his baby mama is. Which is met with all the nuns pointing guns at him through the window, while they force Agatha to go out there and shoo him away like a sad dog.
One. Go! Get it!
This gesture putting her on the good side of the mother of the convent. The mother courts Lady Agatha to possibly take up a job at the convent once she gives birth, essentially giving up the shtick that it's all a baby mill, that these rich people pay a lot of money and just take a kid from one of these poor women. How sincere the proposition was, I have no clue, but this almost allows Agatha a little bit of extra freedom. Or maybe by this point in the film, the nuns were just kind of slacking off around there, because Magatha slips out of her room, sneaks into the mother's office, and steals some of her belongings from the desk. A bunch of transaction histories, and just cold hard cash. Around this time we also see one of her friends giving birth and immediately snuffed out afterwards. I guess they want to leave no witnesses. But then this made this a little surprising that they let Sarah live after she gave birth to her kid. And speaking of Sarah, Agatha shows Sarah the receipt for her child, this really pushing Sarah onto Agatha's side. And with Agatha's due date around the corner, the girls hatch a plan. Miss Agatha steals some rat poison from the nuns, then uses some of the money she stole to pay off some of the other sisters under the mother's employ. So these nuns lock up the mother in the same basement coffin that they locked Agatha in. Thank you, capitalism. And Sarah offers the ladies some refreshments, because those nuns really deserve it. Torture is some hard work. Oops, but let's not forget that rat poison. And now that the coast seems clear, Mary Agatha tries to escape. But she forgot about one person, and it's the same person I forgot about. It's Scarface, the right-hand woman to the mother of the convent. Scarface hunts down Magatha, and as soon as they enter a little altercation, Magatha goes into labor. They actually put their personal problems aside for a little bit. Scarface actually helps Agatha deliver the baby. This starts to go how you might think. As soon as that baby is born, Scarface tries to take the kid and run. But then we get the most metal scene in this whole film. Before Scarface can run off with the baby, Mary grabs the umbilical cord and garrots Scarface, and screams out, "Call me Mary," reclaiming her name. What a girl boss. Now that the nuns have been poisoned, minus one extra tough nun that Sarah was able to take down, Mary and Sarah get away happily ever after, but we get one final scene of the sheriffs entering the convent, finding all the dead bodies around. They enter the basement and find an ominous coffin, still moving. Of course they open it, and then the film cuts to black. Cliffhanger, hell yeah. Honestly, this movie was okay. The biggest sin this movie really had was that it was just plain boring. There honestly isn't anything wrong with the movie. It's well acted, well shot, decently edited. It just has nothing special to it. It's got no spark, no soul. It wasn't particularly scary, and the plot wasn't really anything to write home about. It's just a decent film that fills space. Honestly, I'm just gonna give it 4 Hail Marys out of 10. I was gonna give it 5, but it's so boring and mediocre that I feel like it should lose a point on that fact alone. I don't not recommend this film, but I feel like there's so many other better choices out there that you can go with most anything else and just have a better time. Whether it's a worse film that you can kind of laugh at, or a much better film, like the next one we're going to be talking about. Well, that was definitely one of the films of all time. And now, the grand finale. This one is a rare import that landed on the Dollar Tree shelves. I'm talking about the chilling, the musical, the vengeful Cello. Cello is a 2005 Korean horror film directed by Woo Chae Lee. Lee honestly doesn't have that many credits under his name. Cello was his directorial debut, and since 2005 he only has 2 more features under his name. He has the action thriller The Hunt, and a rom-com by the name of My Worst Neighbor. I don't know if either are particularly good, but at first glance they both look solid. Also, this film is labeled as Tartan Asian Extreme, which made me think that this was going to be some sort of gross extreme horror film, something along the lines of Grotesque or Martyrs. But after doing a little research, I found that it was just a distribution brand that has brought over a lot of Asian films to the West. Movies like Audition, Old Boy, and even Battle Royale, which are honestly all great films. So let's see how Cello stacks up to its fellow extreme counterparts. Cello follows Miju, an adjunct instructor at a music college. Her tenure at this school seems to be a bit in flux, with some really wanting her to stay there full time and others, well, not so much. The most vocal of that latter camp is a student. Apparently she wasn't a big fan of Miju's lectures.
남의 인생 망치는 건 잘한 짓이고.
They get into a little altercation, and the student leaves a weird scar or curse mark on our protagonist's arm. And here is where I'm going to drop a spoiler warning for this film. I normally don't throw in a spoiler warning for this series, but to possibly spoil my conclusion a little bit, I do wholeheartedly recommend this film, and I think you should probably check it out relatively blind. It's a darker tale with some vengeance and classical music, so either use the timecode on screen or the one in the description to skip to the conclusion. But if spoilers really don't matter to you, let's keep going. Miju drives home after that altercation and puts on a cassette tape, a kinda eerie one she found in her locker earlier that day. The curse mark left on her arm doesn't seem to be a big fan of the music, and takes some drastic measures to put it to an end. Miju wakes up unharmed and just returns home. She returns to an eerily empty house, where she searches high and low for her family. We get a little family jump scare.
Dang it, 축하합니다.
It was Miju's birthday, and her family just wanted to do a little something special. We meet her 2 daughters, her husbando, as well as her sister, who's staying with them until her fiancé returns from America. And after the little shindig, Miju gives her daughter a little bath, but it looks like Aunt Flo came a little early to greet the daughter. Being a little surprised because her daughter is kinda young, Miju takes her to the doctor. And during this little doctor's visit, her sister takes it on herself to hire a new maid for the house. And let's just say their dog is not a big fan of the maid.
써니야, 왜 그래?
She just has some generally spooky vibes. It may be partly because she's mute, or maybe it's just her discount goth aesthetic. But Miju is picking up on those bad vibes, and asks her husband just to fire her. But then he starts retelling her backstory, as if she's some toxic villain that some anime forum goer is defending to his last breath.
I want to see your smile. Just once more.
I'm not crying. He just loves her so much. Strangely enough, after the maid started working there, Miju's oldest daughter became really obsessed with playing the cello. Also, we occasionally see this vague dark force creeping throughout the house. Also, Miju's been getting these oddly eerie text messages from someone. We all assume it was that shitty student who was harassing her. And it looks like things start escalating at her work too, where she nearly gets run over by a car. And while this is all happening, her sister receives some bad news from America. Her and her fiancé are done. It seems like he'd been cheating over in the States, and she's not taking it very well. She locks herself in her room, trying to process the breakup, but this leaves her wide open for a spooky ghost attack. Getting some fantastic 2000 CGI over here when the ghost yeets her out the window. The family finding her strung up in such a way that it looks like she committed suicide. This giving Miju's husband a reason to investigate. He starts snooping through some old belongings and finds an old yearbook that belonged to his wife. And there's one person's face mysteriously cut out of all the photos. The husband confronts Miju and she opens up about her past. She was a budding celloist alongside of her best friend / rival. But her best friend really excelled past where she did, and she always felt left behind by this friend. While she was just receiving all this fame and acclaim, until one night her friend tragically died in a car accident. Miju has felt guilt ever since then and gave up playing the cello. I don't know why you would feel so guilty that you would give up playing cello just because someone died in an accident you had nothing to do with. But her husband doesn't press any further, and the harassment at school continues to escalate. And now, sadly, the police are getting involved. And the only hard evidence that Miju had that this student was doing this was the text messages. But the police find out that the texts aren't tracing back to that student. Something seems a little fishy here. Back at home, the kids are reenacting Lion King. Miju returns home to find the little one dead on the front lawn. Man, talk about a tough day. And like any insane parent, she just hides the body and then tells her husband that she sent the kid away on a camp or something. The kid looks like 5 years old and she says that she's staying in some sort of youth hostel. Could she just not come up with a better story? Anyway, the husband tries to call the daughter, hearing her cell phone ring from the basement. So of course he goes to investigate. He goes down to the basement and just finds a lone cello case. And lo and behold, her little body was stuffed in that cello case. Miju coming out of nowhere to explain that it wasn't me, which her husband is totally not buying at this point, and essentially says, "Nah, you're crazy, I'm going to the police," which leads to a little bit of an altercation. Once the body hits the floor, we see at the top of the stairs the maid, possessed by the ghost of Miju's old friend / rival. The ghost has been tormenting her for her past sins, which we finally get to see. While the accident was tragic, and yes, an accident, it turns out that Miju was the one behind the wheel that fateful night. The car swerved from the oncoming traffic and ended up teetering on a cliff, where the rival was hanging out of the car door, and Miju just let her go. Now it's all finally coming together. The ghost makes her way to the eldest daughter's room, and Mama Bear isn't a big fan of that. She grabs a letter opener and charges at the ghost, and actually stabs the ghost. Well, not entirely just the ghost. At least she got rid of the maid like she always wanted. Then Miju goes apeshit on the daughter. She had been playing that same tape from the beginning of the movie, then playing that song back, which was the rival's song from her biggest concert. Granted, she only went sicko mode on that cello. Wait a second. Oh no. Oopsie. Now we get the plot twist of the century here. Get this, it was all a bad dream. I know, masterful writing. Remember when she was careening into oncoming traffic at the beginning of the movie? Well, she actually hit that car, and has been in the hospital ever since. This was all just a coma dream, and once she recovers from the hospital, she returns home. But she's getting a bad sense of deja vu here. This is playing out almost exactly like the night she returned home on her birthday, and even, bam, the same family jump scare. And she even receives the same present she did in that dream, with a little message that says, "This is only the beginning, the end." This was honestly one of my favorite films to cover in this series so far. This was genuinely a great horror film. A bit of a slow burn, and it really feels like there's not that much happening in the first half of the film, but it does a really good job of building dread and suspense throughout. This gives me some classic J-horror vibes, feeling very similar to something like Ju-on or Ringu. While I didn't think it was necessarily extreme, nor as good as some of those other films I mentioned that have the same Asian extreme title, I do think it is a really good obscure horror film. I'm going to give this film 7.5 string instruments out of 10. A genuinely tense and good horror film that nearly anyone could enjoy and check out. Well, this concludes our Dollar Theater triple feature. I hope you don't leave too scared. But if you would like to see more tales like this, why not hit like, subscribe, maybe hit that little bell icon so you never miss an upload. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you very much, and hopefully I'll catch you in the next one.